Oops, sorry for that.
All right, welcome Raider Nation to Silver and Black Today, the live post-game show brought to you by our good friends at BetUS. The Raiders 20-16 winners over the Cleveland Browns. It wasn't always pretty. In fact, a lot of it wasn't pretty, but it doesn't matter. A win is a win, and the Raiders now get even at 2-2. Come back from, of course, the disastrous loss last week against the Carolina Panthers. But they come out today and scared everyone at the beginning. Was really not a great display of football early on, especially offensively. But then they came back. The running game got on track for now, which is a good thing. We'll talk about all the details here. But before you start complaining about what didn't go right, enjoy the win and just realize that it's not going to get fixed overnight. But we'll get deep into it here. I am Scott Gulbransen, your host here at Silver and Black Today. And joining me, as always, on the postgame show is my good friend Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. He gives us our voice of the fan after every game. And Murf, I just couldn't help but think that everybody in Raider Nation, all the great fans, the greatest fans in all of sports, were sitting there at the end of that game with half their brain thinking, okay, we're going to do this, and half the brain maybe thinking, oh, not again. But the Raiders, Charles Snowden, big play there at the end, had a nice game himself. Of course, Maxx Crosby not there. Charles Snowden, a bunch of guys subbed in, but he came up with the big play. And you know what? As my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies, Glenn Ross, closers get coffee, right? Coffee's for closers. And the Raiders, yes, the Raiders get coffee today because they were able to close out the Browns, and we'll get into some of their details, but I want to get your first reaction here. You know, it started so ugly, and it was ugly throughout, but, you know, there's no such thing as an ugly win. A win is a win, and when you're the Raiders coming off of what happened last week, you have to be encouraged that this team, number one, didn't quit. I didn't think they were at that point. I don't think most people did, but I know people were talking about it, but the Raiders came out today and they persevered through some adverse conditions, especially in that first quarter, which was brutal, but they came back and did what they had to do to win this game.
Man, I love that you let it off with Glenn Ross. ABC, always be closing.
Yes.
Put that coffee down. You see that BMW out there? You'd want to be like, oh my gosh, it's such a great movie. Alec Baldwin crushes it in that scene.
Yes.
But another favorite movie of mine, or movie series anyways, is The Godfather. And just like Michael Corleone says, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. And like, gosh dang it, Raiders, man, like the ultimate roller coaster ride. And Scott, I never lost faith.
Of course not.
Of course not, man. I've been in on this thing, and I just tweeted out a minute ago, like, I'm 94% sure that we're going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, listen, but by the, all that silliness aside, at the end of the day, this game was 10-0. I started making taquitos and enchiladas in my kitchen and was like, you know what I mean? And like, you know, Valerie and Vinny and I, we're kind of like half watching. I mean, I'm always keeping an eye on the game because I know we're going to get on and talk about it, but I was like, all right, here we go. This thing is going to go south fast. And, you know, we were talking about Saturday Night Live last night. We're just kind of like drifting in and out and watching the game. And then all of a sudden, like, here they came back, and it was like, the leadership that we've been trusting, the leadership that I've been preaching, and all of us, and not just me, but like a lot of us, that we were, okay, the leadership is what's going to lead to victories. It's going to lead to wins. It's going to lead to positivity in the left column, more so than the right. Those things finally showed up. But then a Raider game broke out, and it was like, whoa, never mind. I guess that, you know, it was literally like, I mean, like 17 seconds later. I mean, you know, it was like and thankfully there was a hold on that Amari Cooper play, but it was like the Alabama-Georgia game all over again, for crying out loud. It was like, what the hell is going on? But anyways, all that said, the Raiders persevered. We had young players. You mentioned Snowden, Isaiah Polamau, guys, and that's what you want. You want to see your players, your younger players, emerge and step up when they're needed. That whole next man up thing. Listen, we were down bad, not only coming off of that win, but when it came to our roster and the amount of players that we were down this week, it was like, I mean, a lot of us were just kind of like, well, okay, well, this thing is just kind of freaking, you know, here we go. But But it didn't. It didn't at the end. And the Raiders closed it out defensively, Scott. And it was an incredibly, I don't want to call it like an inspiring win, but it made you feel good about where this season could possibly go.
Yeah, and to me, that's the key here is the Raiders, again, after last week and all of the drama around that and a lot of it, created after the fact, right after the game, and when Antonio Pierce talked about people doing business, and we saw some of that at the beginning. Obviously, Jack Jones didn't start, which maybe sends a signal, and that's fine. But they ended up coming together, and to me, that's the key here is it's a win, right? I know things aren't perfect, and that was going to be my kind of underlying point tonight to everybody was, look, I understand. Look, the first and fourth quarters both were not good, right? They were both not good, especially offensively. Luke Getsy seemed to dial up some good things, went to the young players, the Trey Tucker, all that stuff. It was good stuff, and then they seemed to fall away from it. So the thing that we always talk about on this show, and I know you guys talk about it too, Murph, which is consistency, right? You have to be consistent. But I will take this, that the Raiders, for example, tonight, we saw them run the ball better. Is it all the way there yet? No. But you had Alexander Madison, 5 carries, 60 yards. He's averaging 12 per carry. Maybe you should give him the ball a little more. Zamir White, 17 carries, 50 yards. So a 2.9 average. Not great, right? And of course, the fumble he had as well. And then you had Turner as well with a rush. And then, of course, Tucker had the 3-yard touchdown. But if you look at this whole situation, you saw things get a little better in certain spots, not all the way through. They still need to put 4 quarters together. But, a lot of people described this game to me. They thought it was going to be a quote unquote pillow fight, right? The Browns also dealing with injuries. Yeah. They can't really score on offense. And you saw Deshaun Watson make some nice plays and then just look terrible again, which is what he's been like since he's come back from all of the off the field stuff. But you look at that and you say, okay, it doesn't matter. You play who's in front of you. The Raiders had an AFC game. Again, this is in the conference. So they have an AFC game at home, and they needed to really I know there were a lot of Browns fans. People are going to be upset about that, but there were Raider fans there who had that bad taste in their mouth from last week. So at home, they get this win. And this was really big, I think, for everybody, for that team chemistry, for them to come back from it and to quiet the outside noise.
Yeah, it was huge, man. There was, I met, we were in Vegas this last weekend and I met, obviously a ton of Raider fans, and there was more than a few that talk about the idea that they live out of town, they're season ticket holders, they sell half the tickets and then they go to half the games. And so there's this, and I'm a capitalist at heart. I'm not begrudging people for doing whatever the hell they want to do with their money. But the reason they do that is because it pays for the entirety of their ticket package. And so, they go to the Kansas City game, they go to whatever the big games are. But anyway, so point being though, this was one of those games coming off that loss against Carolina. Everybody was down. I mean, everybody was down, and we heard from a lot of fans, season ticket holders, that they were like, "Oh, that's it. I'm not going to go this game. I was going to travel to go see the Raiders this week, but now I'm rethinking things." Like, we got tons of messages from listeners out there of Raiders Fan Radio and about how they literally altered their plans based on that Carolina game. Yeah. And I'm not saying that was a knee jerk. I mean, I get it. I totally understand that. The people making those choices, but now it's like, so here's what this Raiders team is crazy this year. It's like, here they had this opportunity to right the ship. Now, I'm not saying 2-2 is like, oh, we're going to sail off into the sunset of a Super Bowl, or maybe I am. But anyway, the point being though, like that idea that like, okay, there is hope here. Right. Like, okay, look, we had a stinking ass football game against the Carolina Panthers, but what did they do in response? And you guys have heard me say this on this show, and I'll say it on our show, and I'll say it to the end of time, Scott. You're not defined by the mistakes you make. You're defined by what you do in response. That's where character shows up. And the Raider character under the leadership of Antonio Pierce showed up today, and it showed up from players that you didn't expect. Yeah. It wasn't Brock Bowers going nuts down the field. It was Trey Tucker. It was DJ Turner. It was, of course, kind of suspected Jacoby Myers, but it was Alexander Madison. Like, it was, those are the guys. It was Snowden. It was like, pull them out, as I mentioned already earlier. Like, those are the guys. And so, like, that's like, wow, like that's something to cling on to as a fan, that even if this thing doesn't go championship style, and I could be silly and joke about it, but even if it doesn't go that way, it gives us some hope and something to root for going into the following week when you're down some of these biggest names. And I'm sure we'll get into it here in a minute, but man, this this might have shined a little bit of a spotlight on the importance of certain players.
Oh, yes. I mean, that to me, that's the big deal here is you have to use, and this is one of the things that we've talked about on this show since Luke Getsy was named the OC. So we'll start with the offense. And that is you have these players, you have these weapons, whatever you want to call them. And whether it's Brock Bowers or Tucker, whoever, you have them, but how do you use them, right? And how do you put them into an offensive scheme that's going to give you the opportunity to move the ball? And I think we saw pieces of that. I still think that it wasn't consistent enough. I mean, you look at the Raiders, of course, on the night, third down, they were 4 of 12, 33%. Luckily, Cleveland is not very good, so they weren't great either. But you had 152 rushing yards. That's a big deal because remember, this team was last in the league in rushing. So to come out and get 152 yards, 29 plays, 5.2 average, good. That's good. Not only that, you're playing against, I know Cleveland was beat up too, but they have a pretty good defense overall. And so for the Raiders to do that, it was good. And to me, that also pointed at times, you saw the offensive line play better. Okay. There were times when there was gaps. We saw Jackson Powers-Johnson have a nice game. He had a penalty, he had a couple other whiffs, but he's a rookie. That's what you're going to expect. I think with what this team has been going through from an injury perspective, what it's been going through from challenges with play calling and all of that, to overcome that and to win the game at home, a game, I didn't call it a must-win game, but it's sort of we kind of have to have this one game, and they did it. And it's good that they did it because you look at what's been happening around the AFC, and you're right. I'm not here to tell you, and some people will call me more of a downer because I'm trying to be more objective, but I don't look at this team as a playoff team per se, but I don't know. Maybe they could be. You could catch fire. Look at the AFC. Look what happened in New York today. Unfortunately for Raider fans, the Broncos won. They beat the Jets at home, right? With a quarterback who passed for 60 yards. So you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. It's a crazy year already. You got maybe 4 teams who are kicking butt at the top, and everybody else is kind of there. Everybody else has an opportunity. So for Raider fans, I understand it. Everybody wants a quarterback next year and all that kind of stuff. But you want to have your Sunday feel good. You want to be a Raider fan and see them win. And I thought tonight they got a little bit better. There's still a lot they got to work on. But you have to look at this and say, hey, adversity, like you said, adversity builds character. And this team needed some of that. And they were able to accomplish that, I believe, even though they had to take it down in the last few seconds to win this one and to win it on defense.
Yeah, and it's time to follow it up now. Not to jump too far ahead this Denver game, but you're right, man. Denver's playing well, and they've got a couple of I would say pretty significant wins already in the league this year. And so now, what are the Raiders going to do to follow this up, man? Because this is going to be a I hate to say a defining moment, and I got corrected by JT the Brick this last week when we interviewed him.
I saw that.
I'm like, is this a defining moment for us? And he's like, nah, man. Or, you know what I mean? And like in terms of the career of Antonio Pierce and his coaching career, and that's why he's a pro and I'm a dopey fan. But anyways, my point being though is that I hate to say that it's like, again, go to the idea of a must win or something definitive or whatever, but it is a division win or division game against a Denver Broncos team that's playing really freaking well right now, unexpectedly for a lot of us. And this whole thing about the Denver Broncos have never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders, let's not freaking lean into that too hard, man, because like this is any given Sunday and week to week and game to game. And right now, man, I think that's going to be a big deal. And especially the idea that now we're playing from 500. Like now this is going to give the opportunity for the Raiders to move into a 3-2 record. And so I'll say this too, Scott, that like just real quick to go back to the younger players stepping up and the things that Luke Getsy did in this game that you mentioned. DJ Glaze, I thought, had a little bit of adversity early on with some of the calls and some of his play, but ultimately that young man hung in there and had a pretty good football game in terms of a whole. That's, again, it's encouraging to see your young players, your rookies, to step up and do that. And while I'm still not a fan of Luke Getsy not attacking the line of scrimmage for the most part, at least this week we saw Gardner Minshew under center. We saw the run game going downhill, and we saw the pass game going past the line of scrimmage mixed in with sweeps and screens and all that stuff that develops behind the line of scrimmage. It was like for the majority of the year, except for that one quarter in Baltimore, Everything has been developed behind the line of scrimmage. Finally, today we saw a blend of that. And I think it was Ross or whoever the heck it was, whatever the kicker is. I don't remember his name, but it was in the broadcast. And they're like, Luke Getsy told us that he wanted to spread the team out and beat their wide nine and do a lot of plays that attack the edges from behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm like, yeah, you think? I'm like, we've only been doing that ever since this guy's been around, but thankfully it worked this time because guess what? You mix things up and you get teams guessing and good things happen. And sorry about my dog barking over there.
That's okay.
He's a Georgia Bulldog, so he's pissed off about last night, and he's pissed off that Brock Bowers didn't have a bigger game today, and the fact that Zamir White keeps fumbling.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he does keep fumbling. But I'll tell you, though, remember, and you brought it up with the young players, Raiders have two rookies starting. We talked about DJ Glaze. We talked about Jackson Powers Johnson. That's tough, right? That's tough against, even though it was a thinner Cleveland Brown defensive front, still tough to deal with. So I think that you got to give that. I saw some people not upset that the Raiders won, but I also saw them not really celebrating that it's a win. You got to celebrate it. There he is. There he is. He's like, what happened with that game last night?
Like, gosh, I thought we were going to get blown out, then we came back.
There he goes. Maybe he can run the ball too. So, but yeah, you look at what they were able to do, and to me that's the question now is, what do you do? Because I saw Luke Getsy at times, and again, it goes back to consistency. I don't know what happened in the fourth quarter, but I do know that he opened up the playbook more. Right, we saw more of those plays utilizing players that were able to produce more. Whether it's Alexander Madison running, whether it was Tucker, whether, they had opportunities there. Now, that to say is the quarterback play still wasn't great. Gardner Minshew did not have the best day. Okay. So we continue to see that. And I don't know why it's happening that way, but we'll see how it goes. But you still won. You are somebody that I think knows this, right? Which is how important quarterback play is. But he did enough. He did enough to do that. And by the way, I have Raider Junkie Cisco, right? I'm here to call out Scott for saying we were going to lose. I didn't say that. In fact, I bet the Raiders to win money. I'll show you that in a few minutes. So I don't know what he's talking about. I didn't say they were going to lose. But anyway, so I think that this situation with the quarterback, yeah, it's not ideal and nobody's excited about it, but he did what he had to do to win the game. And yeah, the numbers aren't going to jump off the page at you, Murph. But again, it's a team win, and yeah, you got to address some of these issues in quarterback. He didn't turn the ball over, which was huge. So when you look at that thing too, you got to say, hey, whatever. We'll see what happens, and if he wins again, then who cares?
I agree. And listen, you ready for me to start a Twitter fire here? Probably a fire in the chat room. The Raiders today had sufficient enough quarterback play to put a W in the win column.
Yes.
There's a certain team that plays in South Louisiana that their quarterback had pretty good stats, but there was a pick six involved. Oof. Cost them the football game. So anybody that was been screaming about having a former quarterback come back and take the helm of this football team and lamenting the idea that he's gone, this is what those of us that have said it was right for the player and it was right for the team to part ways. I'm not sitting here telling you that one guy is better than the other. That's not the message, so don't hear what I'm not saying. But what I am telling you is that there is importance to when you do things in football games. There is important to third and short, to third and long. There is importance to the red zone. There is importance on not turning the ball over. You can fire the freaking league up between the 20s, but when it comes down to it and it's most important, what do you do? The reason that Kenny Stabler is in the Hall of Fame is because he was great when he had to be. It didn't mean he was always great, but he was always great when he had to be, as the legendary John Facenda said. And I'm not even telling you that our quarterback was great today, but he was good enough when he had to be. And that's what led to the victory of this game.
That's right. I mean, you look at his stats, right? Nothing to write home about. 14 to 24, 130 yards, quarterback rating of 73. Deshaun Watson, 24, 32, 176 yards, a touchdown, and he had an interception. Remember the key turnover there, 84 rating. So again, nothing to write home about. And no, the Raiders should not be happy with the quarterback play per se. But like you said, in that situation, when you have a bridge type quarterback, what you want to do is just have them not hurt you. Right now, yes, that means at times they can't help you enough. You want somebody to make a play and he doesn't make it. I get that. But overall, he didn't hurt them today with who he is. So we'll see how that all goes. All right, listen, we're going to take our first break. When we come back from this, I will get back with Murf. We'll talk a little bit more about the game. Raiders 20-16 winners over the Cleveland Browns. Yes, they're back to 500 at 2-2. We'll step aside, of course, the post-game show brought to you by our good friends at BetUS. Don't go anywhere. All right. Okay, here we go. All right. So I got to tell you about our good friends at BetUS. Yes, it's a commercial. So get ready as I talk to you about this and talk to you about my bets. I want to show you guys what I did because I had somebody in there, Murf, saying that I didn't, and Murf checked out for a second, but I'm going to show you that I did bet the Raiders, and I was a winner and a loser. Let me get to my bets here. But anyway, I want to tell you about my good friends at BetUS. So here it was. I bet the Raiders, as you can see here, I bet the Raiders $100 to on a parlay to win. They were -1 at the time, of course, by kickoff, by the way. The Raiders were 2.5-point underdogs. And I bet $100 to right here, as you can see, on a parlay, which I lost because I had the over. The over was 37, by the way. Missed it by 2 points. A couple things there, right? With if the Raiders would have scored one more time, or if the Browns would have perhaps gotten that extra point and the Raiders scored one more time. Anyway, but I did also bet here the Raiders to win. So I bet $50 at 195.45. You kind of like that, right? But my good friends at BetUS, I want to just talk about them a little bit and make sure you guys are familiar with what they're doing. They bring you this post-game show. Great place. Not only do you get the best odds you can get, but also you can get a personal account manager. That's right. They will actually take care of you. Not only that, but you have a special code that if you use this special code, YouTube150, guess what? You get 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. And then you're going to get 125% on deposits 2 and 3 up to $2,000. All you got to do is use this code, YouTube150. That's YouTube150 to get in on the action with our good friends at BetUS who bring you Silver and Black today and this post-game show as well as our other shows. So we certainly appreciate that. So make sure you go check out BetUS and tell them we sent you, and we certainly would appreciate it. I was a winner, at least on one bet today, so I did pretty good, and I would invite you guys to do that as well. All right. Thanks to our friends at BetUS. All right, now we're back to talking Raiders football with my good friend Murf here on the BetUS post-game show. Murf from Raiders Fan Radio. If you don't already follow Raiders Fan Radio here on YouTube or wherever you're watching us, or get their podcast, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio, and make sure you subscribe to our show too, Silver and Black Today. We're an Odyssey Sports original podcast. Do that. Murf will talk about the hat he's wearing, the One Nation Foundation, and tell us about his trip out to Vegas this week for Crab Fest. Of course, the Bolitnikoff Foundation's a big event. You've probably seen his videos, but we'll get you to talk about that. And any super chats, as you know, go right to the One Nation Foundation on this one. I think, too, Murf, when you look at this game, not everything's perfect. We talked about it last week. Antonio Pierce being a first-time, full-time head coach is going to make mistakes. There were some more tonight, not as many, I think, as egregious as we've seen in the past. So we're going to see him kind of work through it on his own. But we do, I think, look at this and say, okay, he was at a fork in the road early in the season, and he clearly got his team there to come out and play with intensity, because I didn't see any lack of effort by anybody today. I didn't see anybody, quote unquote, taking care of their own business. I saw people taking care of team business. And to me, that was a big part of this game. Not only did I think they needed to win it, but I also felt like for the coaching staff, for the locker room. They really needed to come out and be together. And I think that's what we saw.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you saw the emotional expression from Antonio Pierce when other coaches with the nickname with the initials LG with some of their play calls and setups and managing that offense and costing the team a timeout that potentially could have cost them the football game. Like we saw an expressive Antonio Pierce, and that may always be there, but we're only dependent on the TV cameras to show us what's going on, and so you could see it this week, and you could see that, and so absolutely, I applaud his game management more. At a minimum, it looks like we're learning. We're moving through this thing. We're growing, right? We want to be better. We want to be better tomorrow than we were today, and we want to be better today than we were yesterday, right? Like, and so I think that's the way that this Raider team expressed themselves on the field. And one of the points that you were making there, and I think really needs to be highlighted, is that the energy was there. That because when Antonio Pierce made that comment that we're making business decisions because, well, other people made business decisions on the field, and so we're going to make business decisions. For those of you that aren't aware, and I'm sure you are, but I'll just throw it out there anyways. That's like you can't call an NFL player out more than that. And Antonio Pierce knows exactly what that means and what that meant. And so that idea that he was that willing to step out that far and to put something like that out there, it could have gone one of two ways. It could have gone the Mike Singletary route, or it could have gone the Dan Campbell route. When you take that level of definitiveness, is that a word? If it's not, I just made it up. But if when you take that kind of a stand and you draw that line in the sand, it's going to go one of two ways. And so for the idea that the Raiders responded as a team in that fashion, when you're down a ton of your best players, that is a testament to the man's leadership and coaching. And so I mean, I can't applaud this win enough, Scott. And somebody in the chat room and they're asking me, said, are we back into the burden of expectation now? And shout that comment out. That's pretty funny. But, the answer is no. And I think I finally, now at almost 52 years old, I finally reconciled with the idea that, no, I'm not just going to, be like, okay, I'm going to ride high on this one thing. Emotion is fleeting. And so let's just leave it at that. This is a great win for this team. It's an inspiring win. It is inspiring. I am gonna go there. It is inspiring for those younger players because for that look on Snowden's face at the end of the game, like that's freaking cool, man. And so it was a great win for the team. It was a great win for those players. Now, what are we gonna do in response to it? And until the Raiders rattle off 4 or 5 of these, then you'll get old Murf bought back in and being like, okay, here we go.
Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'll move from being 94% sure that we're going to win the Super Bowl to 199.
I love it. But that's the thing. I think you have to look at this game and I've always said it and I keep saying it and people get tired of me probably saying it, but I'll say it anyway, which is you don't get too high, don't get too low, right? Now, last week was tough. It was tough. And I know a lot of people I saw a lot of people call out Tom Telesco. Why didn't he get this? Why didn't he get that? Well, you saw a lot of those young players, a few of them that he brought in this year, including Jackson Powers Johnson, who had some nice plays on the offensive line. I think I saw somebody in the chat talk about that as well. And to me, that's a big deal. So you're starting to see that. But again, it goes back to coaching. And look, I'm still out on Luke Getsy right now. You're not going to fire him now in the season. I know everybody would have liked that last week. It's not going to happen. So when you do work with him, I think you did see some of Antonio Pierce, I'm going to guess, going to him and saying, okay, Luke, we got to do something else. We got to figure out how we're going to use these guys and mix it up because what we were doing wasn't working. We weren't running the ball, worst in the league. Now we come out here, we run 152 yards on the ground against Cleveland. Alexander Madison, to me, has earned more playing time, and I think he needs to get more carries than 5 that he had tonight. So we'll see if that ends up being something that they do. But you look at, Brock Bowers had that one drop. Other than that, though, he was there. He was often a decoy because they shut him down a little bit, but that's okay. Look what it did, and that's what football is about. If you shut down one player, guess what? that means you're going to have other favorable matchups. And I think that's what the Raiders had to do. Without Davante Adams, of course, they had DJ Turner there, Jacoby Myers on a couple of them. So you have to be able to go to the next guy up mentality. And this Raider team, I think, builds on this. And then you got a big conference game, big division game, I should say, against Denver next week. And to me, this is how you build momentum and consistency, right? So the Raiders, again, still haven't put four quarters together for me, okay? But that's okay. They came out with a win anyway. So now let's put 4 quarters together if you're the team and put it out there, especially against a hated division rival.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity for the Raiders to establish their identity. You know, we didn't know what the identity of this football team was going to be. I mean, we know we've got a defensive coach in Antonio Pierce, and we know that he won a Super Bowl and beat the undefeated, stupid New England Patriots, one of the most high-powered offenses that has ever existed in the NFL. They beat them by a freaking, an aggressive-ass, dominant defense and a great running game. You got, Eli doing what Eli did in that Super Bowl, but that was a fleeting moment. It was really the reason the game was even close was because of the dominance that they played on defense and got after Tom Brady. So it was like, so you kind of knew that that's where Antonio Pierce is going to lean, right? He's going to lean into a dominant defense. He's going to lean into a running game. And even though this is the modern day NFL and you can't just rely on that exclusively anymore, that's still what his identity was. And so now this is an opportunity for the Raiders going up against the Denver Broncos to establish that identity, because we saw it today. We saw scrappy ass defense. Like, yeah, there was some lapses, but that was a scrappy ass defense. And we saw, frankly, a scrappy running game, even despite the miscues in the running game. And unfortunately, Zamir White and the things that happened there. But like you said, Madison having a big old day there. And then when it came to the sweeps, that Trey Tucker play, busting out to the outside, like there was a lot of good that happened in the run game today, and coupled with a scrappy defense that's willing to get after you and disrupt Deshaun Watson. Hey man, that wins football games. And you know what? And you know what's interesting about this too is that when you look at the history of this league, when does that really win you football games? It's in the postseason. That's how you win on the road in the postseason, because postseason in the NFL is a different freaking energy than what it is, as we know, in the regular season. And there you go. And that's why those Giants teams did so well. They were 10-6 and won the freaking Super Bowl, beating again those Patriots. So to be able to establish that early on now, and here being set at 2-2, let's do it again. Let's establish that identity, because listen, even though it's earlier in the year, Denver ain't no joke, man. Like that's not an easy place. We don't have 3 home games in a row, right? We're going on the road. We're going to Mile High. That ain't an easy place to play. Right. Never has been. And so that idea that we could go on the road, a team that's going to be, riding the crest of momentum here, speaking of momentum, for us to be able to go in there and play scrappy defense and run the football well, convert on third down, all those things, Scott, that's when, and all joking aside, that's when I'll start to come back. Again, that's when it's like, okay, like now we're really doing something here, Raider Nation. And so let's see where this thing goes, because I'm with you, man. It could be, again, not to be a definitive win, but in terms of the narrative of this season, and I don't like the word narrative, but you know what I mean.
Narrative. We can do a spelling bee. The Raiders spelling bee. No, but listen, you hit on it earlier, and to me, it's so important. And this is, I think, what you need to do if you're a Raider fan out there and you're listening, unless you're Caxter23, who told me his Fresno State Bulldogs were going to beat my UNLV Rebels, but they didn't. That's for you, Caxter. No, the young players, to me, this is a big deal, because okay, the quarterback, they got to get a quarterback. Yeah, they got to do this, they got to do that. But to me, you saw the young defensive lineman who came in and subbed for the injured players out there. You saw Wilkins have a couple big plays as well. That's why you got him. So to me, to see these younger players come in, they might not be starters yet. That's fine. But here you are in the NFL. It's a game of attrition. You're going to have injuries. So when you have injuries, like if the Raiders would have lost this game, how many of you out there would have been said, well, they were really injured? No, you wouldn't have. You would have said, no, it doesn't matter. You still got to step up and you got to play. And the Browns aren't that good anyway. The Raiders should beat them at home. And they did. And so I thought, again, the offensive line, they hit on something tonight. The lanes were opening. Zamir White still had some issues. Of course, he had the fumble, which was costly, but still, to me, they got to do what they didn't do after Baltimore, Murph. which is Luke Getsy's got to look at this tape from quarters 2 and 3 and say, okay, what did we do here? And what can we use from this to run against Denver? Because Denver's defense is playing better than I thought it was. And so you're going to have to go up there and look how much better this team plays when it can establish that run. Okay. So to me, that's what needs to happen for Denver. They need to go there, but they need to look at this tape and build on it. I just didn't think they built on anything from the Baltimore game. So put them a step back. Now they've got some other things to watch. They opened up the playbook on offense. They got good defensive pressure. The defensive backfield played well. You talked about Palomao earlier, played really well. Maybe Epps never gets his job back. Well, he's gone anyway, so he's free agent.
He's gone. Yeah.
So that's great though. That's what we've all been waiting for, that kid to step up, right? We've seen it for a couple of years and really like him. And sure enough, he got the opportunity at a time when the Raiders really needed to suck it up and win a ball game. And he did it. So to me, while there are things to fix and there are definitely bummers happening, if you look at some of those younger players, that's where I would find the hope. And to your point about postseason, I'm not talking about postseason this year, but you're right. Players learn from those situations. And to be in an adverse situation at the end of the game, too, where the defense had to come up big again, they did, and they didn't have all the bodies. That's a big win, and that's why, to me, it's a big win. Not just because it's a win and because of last week. It's because of how they won and who they won with.
That's a really interesting point. It's something that was a very talked about a topic of conversation this last week when we were in town for the Blitnikoff Foundation event. Was like when it kind of got announced that, Maxx was out and Davante was out, and then Mayer is dealing with a personal situation, and it's all on the heels of these business decision comments, and and then then it just started stacking up, man. It was like, and we had all these different injuries happen. Of course, we knew Thayer was out, and then Malcolm Kuntz is out for the year, and Epps is gone, and it was just like this long list of players that weren't going to be there. It was like, okay, here's the excuses built in. It was, if the Raiders came out flat today, I think that there's a real world opinion where, we'll just say beat writers or whoever else is saying, well, they couldn't do it because this. Like, here's this reason why you can't. But listen, if championship teams and well-led football teams, there is no excuse. You'll find a way to fight through that adversity. And so I think that, yes, God, it's a huge badge of honor today. And that's where I say that it's inspiring, is that it's not so much about like, oh, record wise, or this was a clinch a division, title, or this launched us into the playoffs or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to oversell it like to that level, but the reason that is inspiring is that we saw, and I'm a leadership junkie anyways. Like, I just kind of get
me both.
Yeah. Right. And so we like to see things go well based on what people that are running institutions do and their actions. And here we were talking about a football team and Antonio Pierce. Here's where it is. I mean, like, again, the leadership that showed up in the third quarter of the Baltimore game led to a win. The leadership that showed up this week during during the preparation and everything else that led up to this game led to a win. And so that's really freaking cool and really, again, encouraging as a Raider fan. Then now let's find out if it's going to ring hollow or not. We'll find out. We'll find out next week, because this isn't a depleted Denver Broncos team. They've got their first round quarterback who's playing well, unfortunately. He's got his lapses. I watched a lot of that game today against the Jets, which was
60 yards.
Talk about a slog, man. Like, that was a boring game in the rain. And whatever the Eagles, man, I had, speaking of betting, shout out BetUS, I had the freaking Eagles doing a little bit of something against the freaking
terrible game.
Between watching the Broncos, the Jets, and the Eagles today, I'm like, my gosh, man. But anyways, the point being, though, is that, but here's a Denver team that's playing a little inspired themselves. And so we'll again define this identity of this Raider football team when we meet them in Mile High next week.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see and to see how the injuries pan out for the Raiders, because Maxx Crosby, clearly Davante Adams, you want those guys back for a big matchup like that. I also had one of the listeners or viewers was talking about Dylan Lobby and why hasn't he played? He looked so good in the preseason. Well, first of all, preseason doesn't matter. right? Yes, he looked good. But I think with that, you saw the Raider running game. I don't think he's the kind of running back that you need right now. He's a guy who's going to play, catch balls out of on third down, especially. And you know what? With some young players, you don't want to throw them in there right away. You want to develop them. And so I think the Raider coaching staff probably looking at a player like that, thinking he can contribute. But again, you got to weigh the short term with the long term. And you saw a lot of young talent in there today, obviously ready to play and contribute. Some of those other players, even I saw some talk about Tommy Eichenberg in there. Tommy Eichenberg's a good player too. He had some nice, he started with a penalty, but then he had some nice special teams plays. And so those kind of things, you got to ease those guys in because what happens? A guy comes in and has a bad game and then everybody's like, oh, why did we draft him? So I think the Raiders are being careful with who they develop and who they put in when, and that's good. From the running back position, though, I just think that you look at Zamir White, he's a north-south runner. So if you're starting to get him to try to go outside, not going to do it. You saw that amazing run by Madison where he cut back twice, did a really nice job. That's more his style. So I think the Raiders need to arrive at what is the right committee of the running backs there. Like, I think Madison, I think that carry should be, in my view, Murph, tell me what you think. I think they should at least be equal. Like, get both those guys in there and don't look, I'm not saying give up on Zamir White yet, but at the same time, Madison's proved it over and over again that he's had the ability and he's got in there. And every time he's touched the ball, he does something for the Raiders.
Yeah, and he's done well in the red zone, too, which was the big knock against Alexander Madison coming in off of his season in Minnesota was that what he was like, I don't know, he had like 7 yards and, on like, I don't know, 20 carries. I'm making numbers up. But anyway, it was like negative yards in the red zone and no touchdowns or whatever the hell it was. It was something bad.
He had the most carries in the red zone without a touchdown.
There you go. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Scott. This is why you're the pro and I'm just a schmucky freaking Raider fan over here. But yeah, like that's so the idea that like now he's done well in the red zone and already proven that he can be reliable in said red zone. Yeah, I'm not even thinking that we need to split the carries. I'm even thinking that he can,
get the majority.
Yeah, why not, man? And then you want to mix in Zamir once in a while and short yardage, which is, speaking of Georgia, which we have a bunch tonight, what was he good at? It was short yardage. Like that's what he did well, was pounding it in from the 1 yard line. So if you want to go jumbo package personnel, on second and goal from the 1, like there you go, give it to Zamir. But outside of that, I mean, he had the one nice run where, he was an ankle tackle away from breaking that.
Yes.
Which would have been nice, but I mean, clearly the more productive player is Alexander Madison. So, I mean, if I'm Luke Getsy and I'm the offensive head coaches, I'm definitely going to lean more into that. And to touch on what you were talking about, Dylan Lobby, let's not forget, man. Listen, Dylan Lobby looked great in the preseason, man. There's no doubt, and I'm not doubting that young man's talent. But he played at New Hampshire. Like you're talking about going from New Hampshire to the NFL. We're not talking about going from the SEC to the NFL. We're talking about going from New Hampshire to the NFL. We're not even talking group of 5. We're talking like Division 2. So like, let's take it easy with that young man. Let him develop, and we'll see where his career is going to go. And I'm with you too, Scott. That ain't a guy that's going to run between the tackles.
No,
he's going to be your Darren Sproles, Danny Woodhead, that kind of guy that's going to be more like a scat pass catching type of running back. We can only hope he would be good as Darren Sproles, but like the point being though is that like that's going to be the type of player that he is. He's not going to be a 3-down running back, man. He's going to be your 3rd down running back, and I think that that's going to be a great fit for him. But the Raiders coaches know more than we do because they're at practice and they watch and evaluate these players every single day. And so if they don't feel he's ready for prime time yet, then we as fans should be comfortable enough with that idea that it's not quite yet ready to put that young man in there. And I'm a fan of this kid, man, and I'm rooting for him.
Oh, yeah.
I think that he can be dynamic, and I'm a sucker for personality, and he's got a hell of a personality. He's funny as shit.
He is.
And so I'm looking forward to when he can take the field. And I think that special teams is where he'll start to make his mark. Yeah. That I think with this new kickoff rules and the punt game and whatnot, like that's where you see Amir Abdullah now. You're eventually going to start seeing Dylan Lobby taking those reps as Abdullah is headed into the twilight of his career. So let's not rush him in there. I'm with you. Let's not deflate his confidence. Let's develop that young man and then start to pick our spots in terms of starting him.
Right. And I think, too, you look at the situation with the Raiders, their offensive line, the offense needed work, and there's work on defense, too, of course. You're never done building. But I think on offense, they drafted 2 offensive linemen this year. We saw DJ Glaze play pretty dang good tonight, I think, after some maybe hiccups at the beginning. But you look at the idea of building this team on offense. Yes, you need a quarterback. Okay, number one. Number two, though, you can get a running back. And the Raiders are going to have to go get another running back. And I think that's just one of the pieces you look at. That's why they signed Madison, because they weren't, I think, completely convinced on Zamir White. And with the scheme coming in of Luke Getsy, and if Luke Getsy's here next year, then you got to stick with that scheme. You got to get a running back that fits that scheme better, a younger running back that fits that scheme better. So I think they'll have the opportunity to do that. Again, though, if I'm a fan of a team, I don't want them to do it next year. I want them to do it now because I want them to win. I want them to look better. I want them to do all that stuff. But in reality, it's going to take a little bit of time. But I agree with you on Madison. I think, too, he's just been the better running back. And so let's see what he can do with more carries instead of 5, because he was sure dang good on 5 tonight. And we'll see how that all goes. On the defensive side, we talked a little bit about the defensive backfield. Everybody, I think, did a great job. But we talked about Jack Jones sitting at the beginning, obviously, for issues coming out of that team meeting. But after that, he was great. And yes, Deshaun Watson is a shell of his former self, but they did play good defense. And I was a little bit surprised by that, because it seems as though the Raiders tend to be the elixir for bad quarterbacks to have good days, or quarterbacks that are coming out trying to get back in, like we saw last week with Dalton, although Dalton did pretty good today too, in a loss there. So you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, this is going to be tough for the Raiders, but they came out and they played really, really well. So there's lots to build on here. And I think that you have to look at the deficiencies. Yes, that's part of the game, but you also have to look at what you build on from the positives with this win, Murph. And to me, there were plenty of them. Yes, we will talk this week, Mo and I, and I'm sure you guys will talk on your show too, about what they still need to figure out. But just at least come out of this Sunday feeling good about this win and feeling good about the fact that they actually ran the ball for once. And yeah, Gardner Minshew was not great, but he didn't turn the ball over, and they were able to get big plays when they needed them.
Yeah, and I love your comments there about the defense too, because we've talked about Isaiah Pulamau. We talked to some of the secondary players that showed up today, but shout out Luke Masterson, shout out Adam Butler, and shout out Christian Wilkins. Like, we expected Christian Wilkins to have a big presence in this defense, but I think today, and especially in the absence of Maxx Crosby, for him to have the level of dominance that he had today, and again, Adam Butler, the interior of our defensive line has struggled for years. We're talking about going back to Tommy Kelly and Richard Seymour, for crying out loud, for the last time that we had a dominant interior of the defense. And today we saw those two guys play incredibly well up front. And if we can continue to do that, backed up by a guy like Masterson, who steps in for Divine Diablo. And I know a lot of Raider fans were like, Divine Diablo needs to go. He needs to go. He needs to go. And hey, I wasn't necessarily on that train, but I will remind. I'll spit it out. Sorry, Scott, I get excited.
That's okay, but I do it all the time.
I will rewind my opinion back to 2 years ago. I will never forget doing this post-game show, a preseason game against the Patriots, and I'm on with you and Mo. And Mo asked, he said, "Do you see anybody out there that flashed today?" And I said, "Yeah, 59, this Luke Masterson guy." And Mo goes, "That's my guy too." And you know what? So that's our guy, man. I'm going out and getting a 59 jersey as soon as we hang up. So shout out the defense, but then also too, I'd like to draw a light to the special teams tonight. Martin in the chat there, AJ Cole. Come on, AJ Cole, with his little freaking walk coming off the field there on that amazing punt that got the team pinned, got the Browns pinned inside the 5-yard line. But just all the special teams. Daniel Carlson, shout out DC2 today, did an incredible job out there. And Tyreek McAllister, man, that young man took a beating today. And so that idea that, he got decleated like 3 times in this football game. Like, talk about tough, man. So an incredible game by those 3 players, but all the special teams. You got to win in all 3 phases of the game. And so clearly, like you said, defensively we were great today, but on the special teams game today, man, I think they balled out.
Oh, yeah. You look at the defense, too. Again, Spillane. I go back to 2 years when they signed him before last season, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Tonight, 9 tackles, right? And you look at Adam Butler with 4 tackles. Talked about Masterson with 4. Also, Chason, the guy saying last week that he had 3 tackles as well and 4 combo tackles. And then, of course, Snowden with the sack, Polamalu with the sack, and then Robinson and Wilkins had a half sack each on that one play. And Tyree Wilson, a couple nice plays. So we'll see that. I know he kind of disappeared at times, but when they needed him a few times, he also stepped up. So that was great. And I just think that the defense overall, again, not playing the best team in the world, but that's okay. You just got to build on execution. And I thought tonight overall, of course they had outages, but I thought overall they executed really well on defense. And listen, again, it goes back to a win. And I really liked watching Snowden today. I thought he was full of confidence. And as he performed well, and then to come up with the play at the end of the game as well, just huge for this kid. And he's one I'm going to be watching the next few weeks to see what he's able to do, especially if Maxx Crosby misses any extended time and they have to go with this again next week. So we'll see how it all folds up. Okay, we're gonna wrap up here pretty soon. Murf, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
We do a quick one. People are killing me in the chat about Luke Masterson.
I know.
I'm not trying to tell you that he had the best football game, but when he needed to make plays, he did. That's what's important to me. I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap if listen, if you have lapses through the course of a game, but what happens when it matters most? And Luke Masterson 59 flashed. So that's all I'm telling you, Raider Nation. I'm not trying to tell you. They don't think the guy's going to be a future Hall of Famer, but when he needed to be good, he was pretty freaking good today. Look at the plays. Context. This is context. This is the same conversation I've had with every Derek Carr apologist that's ever existed. It's context. When do you do things counts? That's the most important thing. It's not about, I assembled this stat, or you missed this play, or you made that play. When did you make that play? I can't stress that enough. We got to get out of this mindset. Look, and things are going to happen. NFL offenses are going to execute. They're going to make plays. These people get paid millions and millions of dollars to do this shit. Stuff is going to happen. But do you stop them when it counts most? Do you make that play in coverage? Do you stop that running back? Do you add pressure on that blitz? Those are the things that counts, man. Don't get caught up in overall, Luke Masterson had a weak game today. No, bullshit, man. He made some plays when he had to, and that's going to make him. When did Divine Diablo do that this year? How many of those did he make? Not as many. That's all I'm saying, Raider Nation. Context, man.
Well, context is important too, because you're right. Not every player plays all 60 minutes perfectly. And some players have games where they're not their best, but if they come up with a big play, I think you got to credit for them, and that's exactly what you were doing. And I saw a couple of those from Masterson to be sure. So it's all good. Now, listen, before we check out, Murf, we got to tell everybody. First of all, I want you to share with everybody. You went out to Crab Fest and to make the donation from the One Nation Foundation. First, tell everybody about One Nation Foundation again, just in case we have some viewers who don't know. And then tell everybody about the Crab Fest. And then I'm going to invite everybody now, go watch the videos on the Raiders Fan Radio channel on YouTube so you can see some of these amazing interviews with Raider legends and my good friend JT the Brick, all these different folks that you encounter there. But tell everybody about the foundation. Tell everybody what you're able to do.
Masterson Butler 24. That's what I got to say. But totally joking. Thank you for asking about the One Nation Foundation. I'm wearing a hat here. So we figured out we could make money with Raiders Fan Radio a handful of years ago. And when we figured that out, we decided we were going to give it away to all Raiders related charities. And one of the first that we partnered up with was the Bolitnikoff Foundation. They're taking young women that are at risk of domestic violence and substance abuse and giving them not only safe spaces, but rehabilitative services. And so we were out there to present a check to the Bolitnikoffs for $10,000 based on the generosity of Raider Nation. We are just a vessel. We're the gathering point. Raider Nation's the one that raises that money with direct donations, with merchandise sales, with heck, even if you can't contribute monetarily, just liking our Raiders Fan Radio videos and hitting a subscribe and sharing it with your Raider friends. That's the ultimate currency when it comes to social media, because it increases our advertising opportunities. And so can't thank you all enough, because again, it's not us, it's you, Raider Nation, that makes this stuff happen. And can't thank Scott enough for the platform here at Silver and Black today. And We've got some incredible things partnered up that we can't wait to announce to all of those of you. Some of the things that we got going on between our two shows and ways to benefit the foundation. And then again, these Raiders related charities. And so, yeah, it was an incredible event. It's a fan's dream come true. As much as it's not about us, the fan in me, like, and Michelle and Jeff and sadly, just why Jeff couldn't make the trip. He had a family emergency last minute, but the fan in us, the opportunity that we have to interview Raider legends. I mean, it was so funny. Jim Plunkett and I have this like really funny dynamic. Like, I really don't think he likes me at the end of the day. I don't care. I'm still going to chase him.
Doesn't matter.
Interview. And so at one point I get up from our spot there, from our little booth, and I go up and I'm stalking Jim Plunkett. And I'm like, Jim, will you come sit down with us? And he's like, oh, I got to go find my wife. I'm like, no, come sit down. I'm like, well, we'll take 2 minutes, Jim. And he's like, all right. And so he like comes over, he like sits there like reluctantly. And so anyways, so I had a nice chat with Jim Plunkett, but we talked to Lincoln Kennedy, talked to George Atkinson. Yeah. Man, that was incredible, man. It was so fun talking to George. But man, like you said, JT the Brick, well, like, not to rank these things, but probably my favorite interview of the night was JT. And it's because, we've talked to Jim before. We've talked to George and, of course, Freddie. We've talked to a ton and all that. But getting a chance to talk to JT, who I have a ton of respect for because of where he came from and, like, his start in the business. And for those of you that don't know, look it up. For a fan broadcaster like me, to look at a guy like JT and the trajectory of his career and the respect that he has and the job well done that JT has done. It's impressive as hell to me. And so that's getting to sit down with JT and cut it up a little bit, man. That was great. It was really, really cool. So anyways, all that stuff's on our YouTube channel. It's Raiders Fan Radio. It's youtube.com/Raiders Fan Radio. And if you want to listen to the audio podcast, all you got to do is search for it, RaidersFanRadio.com. And the foundation, most importantly, is OneNationFoundation.net. You can go to that website. You can donate directly there at OneNationFoundation.net, or you can jump into any of our shows and you can contribute there via Super Chat and whatnot. And also, like you can here at Silver and Black Today. And thank you again, Scott, for this platform, brother. I don't know if I do a good enough job of expressing to you how important and how thankful we are that you sharing your platform with us, with our dopey little fan show. The amount of impact that it's had, man, I cannot and we cannot thank you enough for that. So again, if I haven't said it enough, thank you, man. We love you. And I can't wait to do this thing live in Cincinnati with you here in a few weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. We'll have details on that soon. But yes, I have it scrolling on the bottom of the screen too, by the way, OneNationFoundation.net. If you want to go there and make sure you contribute $10,000. I mean, just amazing for you guys to do that. And Plunkett not liking you, hey, that's okay. But I loved watching your videos because, like you said, you do a fan show and it's phenomenal, right? And to me, when you come on our show and talk about the Raiders from a fan perspective, it's always well thought out. And yes, you bleed silver and black, no problem, right? But also watching you do those interviews, it gave me tingles because I could see the kid in you. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's how we all feel like when we meet heroes of ours, right? And we all have heroes growing up. They play football, baseball, whatever your sport you're into, movies, whatever. When you get to sit and talk with them, but your interest and your questions to them too have to be refreshing because, when you do a professional broadcast interview and you guys do a professional show, I don't care if you're fans or not, it's professional. But when you talk to a normal media person, it's just a different sense. You guys are there. Not only do they know you because you've been contributing and all the great work you do for the foundation, but the fact that you talk to them and you have just a good natured, fun conversation about all kinds of subjects, including when they played, including the Raiders, the current, I think it's probably refreshing for them. And, Jim Plunkett, maybe he's got hemorrhoids, you just don't know. It's one of those things, but no, but it's all good. So watch those interviews, folks, if you haven't watched them, because they are fun and they're great. And if you really want to get a sense, because, again, you see a TV clip, you're not getting the player. The player is like going to answer the questions. They got kind of stock answers sometimes because they do it so much. But sitting down with you guys, comfortable, sitting back in a chair at this charity event where they've maybe had some cocktails, It's really great watching. And yeah, I agree with you on JT, by the way. When I was on Raider Nation Radio, my show was right after his. He was the most cordial, always tried to help me. He would have me on his show. He was awesome. And I'm glad that you guys got to spend some time with him.
Yeah, man, it was super cool. Thank you. And that means a ton coming from you, Scott, being a guy that does this for a living. That means a world to me. And that's just, we try to, like, you're right. I mean, the kid in me just kind of comes out, and I was just like, what do I want to talk to these guys about? And it just kind of comes through, and it's just conversational, and it's fun. And it was funny when I got home, my baby Valerie, I told her, I'm like, my biggest regret from this whole thing is, and she's like, no, what? I'm like, one of her favorite shows is 2.5 Men. We were watching 2.5 Men one night, and Lincoln Kennedy,
he was on
the opening bit in one of the episodes. And I'm like, I got to ask Lincoln about that at the Crab Fest. Scott, I've been thinking about that for 8 months, and I forgot.
Oh my gosh. Well, you were so busy though. You guys were doing so much there, and there's so much activity going. Like, you forget things because there's just so much going on, but you nailed it anyway. So I know everybody who watches it will agree with me on that. So great work as always to you and to Michelle. And of course, our prayers and thoughts with Swag Jeff with his situation. But certainly you guys did a fantastic job. And I can't wait for you to come up here, and we're going to have fun the night before the Bengals Raiders game. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah, we are. we might be feeling a certain kind of way on the post game show after that Bengals game. We better win, because we're going to need the adrenaline. Yeah,
and we might have to put parental advisory on that show. And that's okay. Sometimes you got to do a little. You have a little fun, just like when I was down at your place. We got to do that.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun! By the way, man, that was a blast. We talk about that show all the time. We still hear from people all the time. We're like, man, when Scott came into your show when he was on the studio, we're like,
and he had too much to drink. It was.
Yeah, but they're like, we saw a side of Scott that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's all good. That's what we'll do here. We'll have fun.
And then Mo Moten came on there and dropped F-bombs. That was incredible.
I hadn't even heard Mo say the F word. So there you go. It was crazy. So, and we're trying to get him with his dang schedule. We're trying to get him to Cincinnati. We'll see if I can. I might have to kidnap him. I mean, it's just what it comes down to.
Oh my gosh. That'd be incredible. I'll drive to New York and go get him.
That would be awesome. Show up at his door. Bop, bop, bop. Oh, hey, well, come on, man. Get in the car. We're going.
Come on, we're going.
Call in sick. We're going. All right, Murf. Listen, man, I appreciate you so much, and for always coming on the show here too, because I love talking with your perspective after a Raider game, because it gives us, I think, I could do analysis, we could do all that crap, and that's fine. We do that during the week, but I love hearing from you guys and what you thought of the game and what's happening. So, as always, appreciate it, and appreciate you spending the time. And we will talk to you next week.
All right, brother. Sounds good. Look forward to it. Let's go.
Right.
The Broncos ass. What do I call Broncos for? They're donkeys.
Right? Is that what? All right. Take care, brother. All right, everybody. Listen, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you guys being with us here and with Murf as well. And always fun. And just be happy with the win. Be happy with the win. Listen, there's other things the Raiders got to get done. But I think that you can look at the running game tonight. You can look at some of these other things and feel pretty good about them. Yes, there's other issues to deal with, but you just want to see your team get a little better each week. And I think after what happened last week, the Raiders coming out, getting this win, number one, and number two, establishing the running game, seeing a little better play there, especially during that run game from their offensive line was big. And then, of course, the defense coming up big there at the end. So we'll build on it. We'll see what happens with the injuries and see if they get everybody back next week, but certainly good. Also, a reminder, our good friends at BetUS, you can see the code on the bottom. And yes, I had somebody ask the question, can you use them in Nevada? Yes, you can. But you can use the code YouTube150, 150% bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. So you put $100 in, you get 150 and so on. Do that. And then on your second and third bonus, you're going to get 125% up to $2,000 by using our code YouTube150. Special thanks to our good friends at BetUS for bringing that to you. All right. We will be back on Tuesday. Mr. Mo Moten and I will be. We'll talk more about this game in depth, a little more of the X's and O's and what we saw and what needs to get better before they go to Denver next week to take on the Broncos. Until then, we appreciate you being with us. We want to thank our producer at Odyssey. That is Mr. Mike Robier. For Murf, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today. Everybody, have a great